Happening. A happy Tuesday to all of you. Thanks for joining me. As always, it is much appreciated. Lots of new reporting on the Krafts and if Jonathan Kraft will actually run football operations. More on that later. But let's start with the offensive staff. Look, all of us can agree on this. Unequivocally, the last 2 years, the Patriots offense has been a disaster. Whether it was Matt Patricia, Joe Judge, Bill O'Brien, Mac Jones, Bailey Zappi, it has been a cluster bleep the last 2 years, and it has to be fixed. Yes, wide receivers, upgrading there, it will help. Upgrading at offensive tackle, that will help. The offensive coordinator position is the biggest job that Jerod Mayo has on his docket right now. He can't get this wrong. If he gets the OC job wrong, then everything falters from there. This is the number one priority for Jerod Mayo. Not defensive coordinator, not GM, not football of opera. The number one job right now for Mayo is to find the right offensive coordinator. Evan Lazar, Patriots.com, had a couple of posts last night. Offensive-minded head coach / head coach candidates in the divisional round. Ravens have Todd Monken. Chiefs have Reed. Texans have Slowick. 49ers have Shanahan. The Lions have Johnson. The Bucks have Canales. The Packers have LaFleur. Evan posts Joe Brady with Buffalo is the only one I'm not including yet, but he's no slouch. Divisional round teams by expected points added per drop back. San Francisco's number one in that category. Green Bay is fourth. Buffalo's fifth. Baltimore is sixth. Detroit is seventh. Tampa Bay is eighth. Kansas City 12th. Houston 13th. So when you look at the teams that are remaining, first, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, and eighth take up 6 of the 8 spots in the divisional round when you look at offensive EPA, i.e., their offense is pretty damn good. Lazar, one final note. The last time a team won the Super Bowl without a top 7 passing offense in DVOA was in 2015 with the Denver Broncos. Ipso facto, you need offense in this NFL to win a championship. That's what you need. You need one of the best offenses in football if you want to win a title in 2024. Fact. Going back almost a decade, the evidence shows you that. It tells you that. So what are the Patriots going to do at OC? Well, Mike Garafolo of the NFL Network said if it's not Bill O'Brien, it could be Josh McDaniels. Burt Breer said that O'Brien is going to be in the mix, but the Patriots will have an open search. And as a matter of fact, Breer said that Jerod Mayo will be empowered during that search. It's going to be his choice. He's going to hire the next OC. Chad Graff from The Athletic, he wrote that O'Brien could return. McDaniels could be back. Andrew Callahan wrote this morning for the Boston Herald that until the search is announced / conducted, we have to assume that O'Brien will keep the job. So that's what's been reported. That's what's been said. What would I do? What do I want? I'll tell you in a minute. But first, don't forget to give us that thumbs up if you're watching on YouTube. It is so important. Yesterday was the best podcast numbers-wise we've had in a couple of months, and it's all because of your support. More likes means more eyeballs. Like, comment, subscribe. If you're watching on Facebook, give us that like. If you're watching on Twitter /X, give us that like. So what would I do? Number one, here's what I want the Patriots to do. I want the Patriots to go outside this system. I want them to go out and find somebody who can run a different system, a different scheme. Go outside the Patriots' echo chamber. Get away from this Bill O'Brien, Josh McDaniels, Charlie Weiss offense. Go somewhere else. Find something new. Find something that's been more effective. Find an offense that can be run efficiently and well without the greatest quarterback of all time playing for you. That's what I want. That should be number one on the list. Go outside the organization and find somebody. Find new ideas. Find the new scheme. Find somebody who is willing to innovate and create. Get the most out of this offense. We didn't see much creativity last year from Bill O'Brien. We saw some creativity from Josh McDaniels in 2021. But as I start with this idea of begin from the outside. The Patriots should be clamoring. Jerod Mayo should be sitting back, foaming at the mouth, picking up that phone and calling people around the league to see what they're doing. What have they found the last few years? Devin Allen with a super chat jumps in. Again, if you want to jump the line and get your comment read, the easiest way is for the super chat. McDaniels or Bill O'Brien are the best choice. You need to limit the flight risk. We can't afford it. It's going to lose another coordinator every other year. It's a reasonable point by Devin. The flight risk is reasonable. I'm going to go through some names here for you on my list that I would be giving a call if I were Jerod Mayo to try to see if they're willing to come into town here and work with this offense and start anew. But it's a legitimate concern by Devin. The flight risk you have to think about. If you hire the next young gun, that guy could be out the door next season. And then Jerod Mayo is left trying to build this thing back. My pushback, though, to Devin is build the staff. Build a staff. If you build the staff correctly, you shouldn't be concerned about one guy leaving said staff. If you build it right and you build it with some depth, then you have somebody ready to take over. And that's where Bill Belichick faltered, right? Josh McDaniels leaving. Everybody should have known that McDaniels was a flight risk. He had already gone to Denver. And Belichick had no true backup plan for McDaniels. He could have with Nick Caley, but he decided to go with Matt Patricia and Joe Judge. So if you bring in somebody, they have to have younger coaches underneath them that you believe can take over in the next year or two if that guy moves on. Have a freaking plan. All right, so let's get to some of these names. Some of the names that I think should be considered for the Patriots as their next offensive coordinator when you look outside the walls of Gillette. Eric Bieniemy is a very interesting name. He obviously helped develop Patrick Mahomes. I think he's unlikely to be a head coach. I mean, when you look at the interviews that he's had, he has never been offered a job. I think there's a reason for that. Ryan Poles had an opportunity with a background that involved Eric Bieniemy to hire him as the next head coach in Chicago. He wasn't even interested. Thanks, but no thanks. So Eric Bieniemy would be on my list if I were Mayo. I would talk to Bieniemy. Obviously, Ron Rivera is gone in Washington. Nobody knows who's going to go in there and coach that football team. They have a new GM in Adam Peters. So I would give Eric Bieniemy a phone call and see if he would be willing to come over to the New England Patriots as the next offensive coordinator. That's one name I would call. Another name I would call is Kellen Moore. Kellen Moore obviously was the offensive coordinator for the Chargers last year. He had top offenses in Dallas in 2019, 2021. He relies on a lot of motion pre-snap. He did a lot of good things with Dak Prescott. He jumped over to the Chargers last year because Mike McCarthy wanted to take over play calling. Obviously, Brandon Staley is gone from the Chargers, so they're going to be shaking things up. Jim Harbaugh interviewed with them yesterday. I have to imagine that Harbaugh has a good chance of landing in LA, and I think Harbaugh, as we know, is that kind of guy that will hire his people, and he runs offense the way he wants to run offense. It's more his philosophy than somebody else's. So when you look at Kellen Moore in LA, I think he's a name. Now, to go off of Devin's point, Kellen Moore would be a flight risk. Moore could be a head coach in the next 2-3 years, maybe even sooner than that. But he's got a quarterback career, obviously. He has a quarterback background. He's worked with young quarterbacks. Clint Kubiak is another name I'd look at. Kubiak is the San Francisco passing game coordinator. Now, Kubiak, yes, the son of Gary. He's from the Shanahan-Kubiak tree. Back in 2021, he was with Kirk Cousins. Cousins had a fantastic season in 2021. So Clint Kubiak, who's now in San Francisco, back under the Shanahan umbrella, that is somebody I'd have a conversation with and see if he would be interested. Nick Caley, who had been here in the past. Nick Caley is a name that I'd look at. He is also out there in LA, but he's with the Rams. He is the tight ends coach. Interestingly enough, before Matt Patricia and Joe Judge were given the job, Caley was the guy that was inside the system that many expected to have a good shot at being named offensive coordinator. When Bill went to Matty P and Joe Judge, Nick Caley left town. He went out to L.A. So he's got New England experience. I would imagine he has some kind of relationship with Jerod Mayo, which I think helps. And he went to work with Sean McVay. So Nick Caley is somebody that I would consider. Shane Waldron is another guy I would consider. Seahawks offensive coordinator. He had time in New England. He has spent 5 years with McVay. So you have to imagine he soaked up all of the McVay juice as far as offensive philosophy and what they do. So I think Nick Caley is somebody that you call. Mike LaFleur, we stay in L.A. Rams offensive coordinator, another guy from the Shanahan-McVay tree. He was given the OC job with the Jets. When they drafted Zach Wilson, we know how that ended. It was miserable. Was that because of LaFleur or was that because of Zach Wilson? And we all know LaFleur's brother and what he's done with Jordan Love in the Green Bay Packers. So Mike LaFleur is somebody that I would look at. All right, give us that thumbs up. Give us those likes. Don't forget to comment and subscribe. Trying to get to 1,500 subscriptions. We're getting closer and closer. Last week, the best week we've had here with the Nick Cattle Show, all because of you. Yesterday was a tremendous start on a Monday, on a holiday. I appreciate every single one of you. Let's continue to build the community. Like, comment, subscribe. If you're listening on Apple Pods and Spotify, rate and review. Let's go to John Christian. Says, Belichick was on the right track with changing the offense. Problem was he put the wrong people in charge. I agree. I don't think it was a bad idea from Belichick to go towards that Shanahan offense in 2022. What was abysmal was the idea of putting Patricia and Judge to install that offense and run that offense, a defensive coordinator, a special teams guy who had no experience with that offense to take charge of it. That was a disastrous idea. Justine, morning, Nick. Heard on the Sports Hub we were holding on to a Belichick. Oh, well. Well, we'll see. It looks like Brian and Steve have both been offered jobs to return by Jerod Mayo. And, whether or not that is going to happen, we'll have to see. Belichick obviously had an interview with the Atlanta Falcons, which was really strange. As much as we anticipated it happening, it was strange to see the tweet last night that Bill Belichick interviewed for a job. It was very strange, but we'll see if that happens. They might end up with their father. Mike N., get a new QB in this draft, build an offense around them based on what that individual does best. It's an interesting point by Mike. You're going to draft a QB, most likely. So you have to hire this offensive coordinator before you choose your quarterback. So what do? Do you pick a coordinator who has one strict focus offensively, one strict philosophy, and say that philosophy fits with that quarterback? Do you find a coordinator who has a versatile background, who could work with multiple offenses? You look at some of the names I just mentioned. Nick Caley in New England, but has gone elsewhere with McVay, right? Kellen Moore has moved around a couple of times. Shane Waldron is somebody who was with New England and has his roots with some of that offense. But, he moved on and worked with McVay and worked with, Pete Carroll out there in Seattle. So how do you find that mix? The Grizz 15, OC will be new OC and fix Mac. Media needs to stop ignoring this piece. Jeff Howe's report sheds light on this not being on Mac. The Grizz 15 wants Mac still in town. Look, I don't think that's going to happen. I think they're going to move on. I think Mac Jones would like to move on. You do wonder, though. This is something that we're probably going to discuss later on at some point. It's on the list. It's tough to, with all of this news, do a 30-minute podcast with everything breaking with the Patriots over the last few days. I do want to get to the handling of Mac and what's been reported over the last few days, and the idea of, if this is up to the Krafts at some point, do they hold on to Mac? Do they keep Mac Jones? Do they try to repair Mac Jones with a new OC, better weapons, and better tackles? I don't think it's going to happen, but it's a conversation I would like to dive into. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. If you want to jump the line and get your comment seen and heard, the easiest way to do that is to send a super chat like Devin and like the Grizz have done this morning. It points it out to me. I see it, and I get right to it. Edward Butler says, how about bringing back Nick? Nick who? Nick Caserio? Nick Caserio is going to stay in Houston. Bring back me? With the sports up? Not my decision. Let's get back to some more offensive coordinator names. Zach Robinson, Rams passing game coordinator, works with quarterbacks, former NFL quarterback, has a history with the Patriots, was brought in back in, I think, 2010 from the Shanahan-McVay tree. Frank Smith, Miami offensive coordinator. He's coached under Mike McDaniel. He's coached under John Gruden. He's coached under Sean Payton. Now, he is a flight risk. He's getting head coaching interviews this offseason. Cliff Kingsbury. How about that name if you go to college? He is the UFC senior offensive analyst. Works with the quarterbacks. Helped Kyler Murray get to 2 Pro Bowls. He would be a flight risk. And my last name is Thomas Brown, who is the Panthers offensive coordinator. He is part of the Shanahan, Sean McVay tree. He has more experience with running backs than quarterbacks, but Thomas Brown is on the list. So I just gave you a bunch of names. Go outside the walls. There's the research for you, right? I don't just throw it out there and say, oh, they should go outside the system without any ideas. Those are some names for you. Bieniemy, Kellen Moore, Clint Kubiak, Nick Caley, Shane Waldron, Mike LaFleur, Zach Robinson, Frank Smith, Cliff Kingsbury, Thomas Brown. I don't know. That seems like it's 8 to 10 names. So there are options out there. And not every single one of those options would be a flight risk. So those are some names for you. Number one priority for me is to go outside the building. Now, if you want to stay within Jerod Mayo's circle, then that makes some sense as well, because again, Jerod Mayo is going to have to trust that next guy, have a relationship with that next guy. And that's why I think you hear about O'Brien and maybe Josh McDaniels returning. If it was between O'Brien and McDaniels, I would pick McDaniels 10 times out of 10. I think McDaniels is better than O'Brien. He is somebody who is seen across the NFL as a top 5 to 10 offensive coordinator and more towards top 5 than top 10. We saw what McDaniels did with Mac Jones in 2021. We saw what McDaniels did with Jimmy Garoppolo and Jacoby Brissett when Brady was suspended. We saw what Josh McDaniels did with Matt Castle in 2008. So McDaniels has proven to be an effective, productive offensive coordinator minus Tom Brady. And I think he is a better option than Bill O'Brien. If you put those two guys in the room, I am going with McDaniels. The other thing about McDaniels is I don't think you have to worry about him leaving unless he wants to go to college to head coach somewhere. He's from the area. He's been back in the area for at least the last few weeks. He is not going to get another head coaching job in the NFL anytime soon because of what happened in Denver and what happened in Vegas. So you don't have to worry about that flight risk. And you could put Josh in control of the offense, head coach of the offense. Get that out of Jerod's hands. The third option for me, again, number one is go outside the system. Number two is McDaniels. Number three is O'Brien. And you bring O'Brien back and you hope that it was the offensive line. You hope that it was the quarterback. You hope that it was the receivers. And you say, hey, O'Brien, you're going to be able to hire your offensive staff like Belichick did not allow you to do. You're going to run the offense the way you want to run the offense. And I do think when you look at both McDaniels and O'Brien, on the resume, they have developed a young quarterback. They have developed a first-round quarterback. McDaniels developed Mac Jones in 21. And, of course, down in Houston, O'Brien developed Deshaun Watson. So they do have that ability on the roster. Twan jumps in and says, I like Bieniemy. Eric Bieniemy is an interesting name. I don't think he's going to get a head coaching gig. He's interviewed, I don't know, a dozen times at least. And everybody's turned him down. There's obviously a reason for that. Bear Me Jesus likes Shane Waldron from Seattle, or Zach Robinson from the Rams wouldn't be bad. Those are two guys on my list. Shane Waldron makes a lot of sense. History here in New England. You know, a guy that has coached under many different coaches, has witnessed multiple offensive philosophies, makes a lot of sense. Ian says, if you're Mayo, how do you build this thing? I think that Mayo is likely to lean towards somebody that he knows. and has a history with. And that's why I think you could look at some of these guys that have had histories in New England. Nick Caley has a history in New England, but he went outside of New England to work with McVay. That's the kind of guy I'd be interested in. Zach Robinson was here in New England back in, I think, 2010 as a quarterback, so he has at least some idea of the Patriots offense. He has a relationship, or at least was on the team when Mayo was on the team back then, but he's somebody who's worked under the Shanahan-McVay tree. But I think Mayo's going to lean towards somebody that he knows, that he trusts, that he believes in, and let that person run the offense entirely. Sockeye Trout is on the Mac Jones train. Keep Mac Jones and draft a wide receiver. Again, if you want to jump the line to get your comment read, you can do that by throwing in a super chat. Not only do you jump the line, you also help the program out. You contribute to this show. Obviously, I make money off of YouTube ads and Spotify ads. It is not a $1 million business plan. So all of the contributions are appreciated. All right, let's get to the latest on Jonathan Kraft and whether or not he's looking to play the Stephen Jones role in Foxborough. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. We talked about this a little bit yesterday. My worst nightmare is Jonathan Kraft pulling a Stephen Jones and having final say and the owner's son running this operation. I think that would be a disastrous idea, a terrible structure, and it wouldn't work. So what's the latest? Mike Sando of The Athletic got a couple of quotes. An executive told him, I don't think Robert wants to be Jerry Jones. I think Robert Kraft wants to show up on Sundays and watch the team. Jonathan might want to be a little more involved. The exec continued, you have to give Robert Kraft credit because he was smart enough to not mess with a good thing. Think of Tiger Woods' golf swing. He had a good thing, and then he started messing with it. That is what these owners tend to do. Hopefully the Krafts don't do that. Tom Curran had really good information at NBCSportsBoston.com last night. Curran writes, there's mass hysteria that the Krafts are positioning themselves to make these personnel calls. The Wickersham article alleged Belichick felt his culture was being eroded by ownership meddling. It was indicated to me, Curran writes, very strongly that ownership will not be making football decisions, nor have they been. There is no desire to put a Jerry Jones stamp on things, to put a twist on an old Bill Parcells-ism, quote, they know what they don't know, unquote. So Curran coming out very strong saying it's not going to happen. Jonathan Kraft is not going to run personnel. The Krafts are not going to run personnel. They have no interest in running personnel. They learned that with Bill Parcells, and they're not going to revert back to 25, 26 years ago. It's not what they want to do. And I will say this, Curran has been damn good in reporting this stuff. Came out, said the Patriots made their decision pretty much on Belichick after that Germany game. He came out and said that Jerod Mayo, as Mike Vrabel became available, Curran said Mayo is still going to be the guy. The Krafts are not going to move away from that. So Curran has been very accurate when it comes to the thought process of the Krafts. And Curran last night tells us that the Krafts have absolutely zero interest in running personnel. Burt Breer also said he does not think that Kraft, Jonathan, wants to be Stephen Jones. Not interested in that. However, Greg Bedard wrote at Boston Sports Journal on the Krafts keeping the status quo in the front office. Here's what Greg wrote. This is the Krafts, namely Jonathan Kraft, because multiple sources around the team believe he will be the driving force behind football operations now. So Bedard reports that he has multiple sources around the team saying that, yes, Jonathan Kraft is going to be the driving force behind football ops. Greg wrote, this smells like the Patriots are moving closer to the Cowboys model with Robert in the Jerry Jones role, Jonathan heading up everything like Stephen Jones. Also, don't underestimate the egos involved here. The Krafts never liked how they didn't get the same credit as Belichick and Brady as this went on. So, Curran and Breer say Kraft's not interested in running personnel. Bedard says multiple sources tell him that Jonathan Kraft is indeed interested in driving the personnel within the building. Conflicting reports, obviously different sources, right? One guy's talking to somebody, another guy's talking to somebody else. Jonathan Kraft, to me, is not the answer. And I would much rather have the staff that is currently there and the front office that is currently there. I would much rather have those guys do the job. It's pretty simple to me. Allow the football people to make the football decisions. Jonathan Kraft is not a football guy. He's the son of the owner. And we can look through the NFL, the NBA. We can look through all walks of life. We can look at radio. Sons of owners getting the job to run the company, and the company fails. Bars and restaurants, any business. Now, sometimes it works, certainly. But a lot of times, the silver spoon method doesn't work. Being the owner's son, being the top qualification for you to get the gig isn't good enough. Thanks, but no thanks. I do wonder, the Krafts, they're very aware of optics. And you have to imagine they understand that if Jonathan Kraft is running the operation, that gets out, fans are going to be angry. They're going to be frustrated. And I don't know if the Krafts would be willing to pull the trigger on that idea, knowing that, it's a situation where people want new and they don't want the owner, right? They have to know that. They absolutely have to know that. The fact is, nobody knows. Nobody knows if Jonathan Kraft is going to be making calls. I don't know. You don't know. Sources are telling people different things. Nobody knows how this is going to run. But here's the thing. I want to know. And you should want to know. You deserve to know. I deserve to know. For every one of my $500 that I spent on that terrible New Orleans Saints game to go with my wife, I deserve to know who's calling the shots. And tomorrow there's a press conference. Jerod Mayo's introductory press conference is tomorrow. And at that press conference, Jonathan Kraft and or Robert Kraft have to make it clear who is running personnel. Who's the number one guy? Don't give me collaboration. Don't give me it's going to be a collected effort. Who's the number one guy? Who's making the call? Who has that responsibility? Who is going to take accountability for the decisions that are made this offseason? It can't be everybody. So tomorrow during that press conference, the Krafts have to make it clear. Who is the number one? What is the front office structure? And what is the process? How are you going to deliberate? How are you going to come to conclusions on players? Are you voting with your hands up in the front office? Everybody in favor, say yay. Everybody not, say nay. Is that how it's going to happen? You have to allow the fans to know. You've got to give the transparency. Who has the final call? What is the structure? And how is the process going to work through free agency and the draft? If you go up there with a bunch of word salad, it ain't good enough. Curran, meanwhile, did have some troubling reporting last night. Multiple sources expressed to me over the years that Belichick's interactions with ownership weren't that different from his interactions with the media. Free agent acquisitions, trades, draft picks, staff structure, coaching hires, etc. That was all Belichick's kingdom. Ownership built up a tolerance for not being looped in based on Belichick's success. It was Bill's world, and everyone else was just living in it. Ownership is inclined to make very few changes in 2024 beyond moving on from Belichick. This is what got me concerned. The reasoning is, with the biggest tree in NFL history felled, how does the ecosystem respond? Is there growth? The Krafts like the people in their building. This worries me. They do not know who does what and how well. Whoa. So wait a minute. The Krafts have no idea who does what and what they do well, but they're going to allow these guys to run the operation through the most pivotal offseason for this team in 30 years with tens of millions of dollars and a top 3 draft pick? Are we just going to figure it out? I mean, again, I'm not against having Elliott Wolf run the ship. We talked about it yesterday. But if the ownership doesn't know what these guys can do and how well they do it, then how in the world are they going to make these calls? That makes me concerned. the biggest offseason in 30 years, and we're going to throw up a trial balloon? That's what we're going to do? Are we drawing straws for structure? Are you passing around a cup of straws, and whoever draws the short straw is the one that has to take the responsibility in press conferences? Like, it's like the Mayo hire and this decision with the front office. If you land on Mayo, if you land on this front office, okay, but tell me that you're confident in doing that. Tell me the why and have a legitimate process. It doesn't look like that's happening in New England. It doesn't look like that's how the Krafts are running this. And for Tom Curran to write that ownership pretty much has no clue what people do and how well they do it, but yet in the same story say that the Krafts are willing to give these people some of the latitude to make these decisions, that doesn't add up. Give us a thumbs up. Give us a comment. Don't forget to subscribe. If you want to jump the line in the comments, throw in a super chat. I'll get right to you. And is this not the same ecosystem? I mean, this is putting a lot on Jerod Mayo. A lot. He's got a staff, his entire coaching staff, figure out what he's doing there. He has to learn on-the-job training to be a head coach. And now he's going to work with the front office. And reportedly, he's going to have a lot of say, but he's going to be working with a front office that the ownership doesn't really know what they do or how they do it. Hopefully, Jerod knows. Hopefully, somebody in that building knows and can say, well, Elliott Wolf has done this, and he's really good. Matt Groh does this, and I think he's good at doing that. If not, it's going to be a disaster. Now, one thing I do believe that the Krafts did not want to create chaos. The Krafts are looking at this and saying, look, we just fired the greatest head coach in NFL history. We are replacing that coach with a brand new head coach, somebody who's been coaching for 5 years. That's a lot of change. That is a seismic change. To go from Belichick to Mayo and turn over the entire front office, I think would be chaos. And if that's what the Krafts are thinking, I agree with them. You already made a seismic change with coaching. To throw out the entire front office, bring in an entirely new front office with people that might not know Jerod Mayo, you're just asking for a disaster. So I understand that part. But I am a little worried when I read that ownership doesn't know what these guys have done and who's done it well. Because they're putting those guys in charge. From what we're reading, if Jonathan Kraft and Robert wants nothing to do with personnel and they're sticking with Matt Groh and Elliott Wolf, and they don't know what Matt Groh, Elliott Wolf did or did well, what? Like, when you combine all of those things, it's concerning. And this obviously falls all on Mayo. Mayo has to know what these guys do. He has to know what they do well. According to Phil Perry, Jerod Mayo has had meetings, defensive meetings throughout the season, and he would bring in the advanced scouts, and he has an open door policy. So maybe Jerod Mayo knows. And it certainly feels like Mayo is going to have a lot more power than we first thought. And if that's the case, then why did you not talk to Mike Vrabel? Because it does seem like Mayo is going to have a lot of stroke. A lot of stroke. Stanley jumps in and says, why would another OC come here? Well, number one, they need a job. Because the head coach popped them. Or the head coach is gone, right? So they need a job. Number two, you might get a top 3 pick at quarterback. You might have the opportunity to work with Caleb Williams, Drake May, or Jaden Daniels, which is pretty sexy. So those are a couple of reasons. Ryan jumps in, says, whatever offense Mayo brings in, he has to have a plan for offensive coordinators leaving. We cannot be left in the situation again. I agree, Ryan, and it all depends on the staff. You've got to build the staff out. You know, maybe you go out there and you get somebody like Nick Caley, but he's not the OC. He's part of the staff. Maybe you bring back McDaniels and you keep O'Brien. That way, if O'Brien leaves, you have McDaniels. Maybe you bring in Shane Waldron if Seattle's coaching staff during a massive change wants to move on from him. Maybe you bring in Shane Waldron. Maybe you bring in Waldron and Kaylee to support the staff. It's pivotal to not only get the OC job correct, but it's also pivotal to build that offensive staff. That's what you want. That's what you want. Trying to sift through some of these. Peter Jacoby says, Mayo's a coach we've had forever. He's just in a new job. He won't bring the clean house. That would be enough to reset the relationship with Mac. Interesting. I wonder, if the Mac thing, if you go back, if you had Mac with McDaniels, would Mac be open to that? So maybe that is the case, but we'll see. We'll see. All right, so that'll do it today. Offensive coordinator, offensive philosophy, my three desires here. Number one, I want them to go outside the system. If they don't do that, then I'd have McDaniels over O'Brien. My third and final option would be, of course, to bring in or keep Bill O'Brien. All right, Alan jumped in last minute with a super chat. I appreciate you, Alan. I appreciate you, Devin. I appreciate the Grizz all sending super chats today. Keeping the current front office is a mistake. Look at the past drafts. Bill had final say, but Matt Groh and company were still there. They were accomplices. They were complicit. They are tainted. Well, again, I went through this, Alan, yesterday a little bit. If you want to check out the podcast, we went in depth about the front office. I don't think it's a terrible idea keeping Wolf and even keeping Groh there. They've been doing the work over the last year. They have a relationship with Jerod Mayo. The most important thing is that your head coach aligns with your front office and they're on the same page and they say they have the same vision as far as building out a roster, what they want that roster to look like. And I'd still think you could add names from the outside, but it might happen after the draft. They could still add a Trey Brown if they'd like to, who has a relationship with Mayo before free agency, before the draft. Let's not forget, reportedly, Mayo has been talking to people outside the building for front office roles. So that's been kind of swept under the rug. Everybody's talking about the Krafts and everybody's talking about Groh and Wolf. Don't forget that important part, that Jerod Mayo has been talking to people outside the building regarding a front office position, whatever that position would be. We don't know, but he has been having those conversations. So I don't think it's crazy to believe that Mayo could end up bringing somebody in or multiple people in from outside of the building to work with this front office as they get ready for free agency and the draft. And if it doesn't happen before then, I don't think it's crazy to believe that he will do that once the draft is over. Some of those contracts in the front office run out, and then you kind of replenish with new ideas and new thoughts. But I don't think it's crazy to keep the front office intact. These guys have a relationship together. They have worked together. And Mayo obviously trusts many of them, because if he didn't, I don't think they would be keeping these guys around, at least for this offseason. So there is some part of this that makes sense. All right, I appreciate you. That'll do it for Tuesday's show. Tomorrow, Jerod Mayo's press conference. We might do a double pod tomorrow, depending on what is said at that press conference. But tomorrow at 11 a.m. sharp, leading into the Jerod Mayo introductory press conference, we will have our next pod. Everybody, thanks. Like, comment, subscribe. If you're listening on Spotify, Apple Pods, don't forget to rate and review. This has been The Nick Cattle Show.